Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
For there is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I'm your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and today's show is brought to you by the Sanderson Cryptid Generator. If you need a cryptid generated for your own use, it can really help boost tourism to your town after a couple generations, or perhaps you just want to have a TV show or some fun stories to tell on YouTube. Get the Sanderson Cryptid Generator for all of your cryptozoological monster needs. And tonight on the show, I'm very happy to welcome Sharon A. Hill. She's a self-proclaimed strange claims adjuster, somebody I've been reading for quite a while, longer than I thought, actually, when I was going back and looking at some of her writings. She's the author of Scientifical Americans, The Culture of Amateur Paranormal Investigators, and has been published in quite a number of places, and somebody I find intriguing for having been published in both the Skeptical Inquirer and 14 Times. So we're going to be talking cryptids tonight, and I'm thrilled to get into it. So thank you for joining me, Sharon.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. And as I said, I was looking for a piece you had written once about mystery holes. Okay, then you kind of wrote about Mel's Hole, and I was looking at it. I'm like, 2020. I'm like, wow, I've been reading her for a long time.
I've had that blog for like 20 years now.
Right. Yeah. It's been. I hadn't really, it's you lose track of how long you've been kind of in contact with somebody's writings, and then I'm like, well, at least 6 years.
Yeah, at least. Time goes fast.
It does. It's a thrill to be able to actually sit and talk with you now, because like I said, I enjoy your work. And I guess to start off, I was curious, where did it all begin for you? What was the initial impulse to look at anomalies and travel into unknown territory?
Boy, I can't remember. I mean, I've always enjoyed learning about the natural world. Ever since I can remember learning how to read, I learned how to read, I think, at like 5 years old. And I was always into nature books and science books. And I loved Nancy Drew and Scooby-Doo and monsters, ghosts, all paranormal topics, particularly cryptids, haunted houses, things like that. And I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. So I eventually got a bachelor's degree in geosciences and became a geologist. And then, I still had that interest in anomalies, but you're busy, you're growing up and you're becoming an adult. And then I discovered the skeptical literature and the internet. And that was another big, wide open opportunity to see a whole bunch of new information. And I was able to connect to people involved in these subjects like never before. Mm-hmm. I think the internet is really just underrated as the thing that opened up the door to not only paranormal interest for people who had interest in these fringe topics, but also for the skeptical community too, to talk about them. And so there was a much bigger audience on all sides. And then later on, I actually got a master's degree in science education, and I focused on science in the public. But I wanted to do my thesis on something interesting. So I did it on paranormal investigation groups and how they attempt to do science. Do they do science? What does it mean when they do science? So that turned into a thesis, and then it turned into the book, Scientifical Americans. And then I also started a blog called Doubtful News. And at that point, the internet was blogs, which is great.
Yeah.
You got thousands of hits a day. You don't get that now, but at the time it was fantastic. And I would do this daily, just connect or collect news stories. And I already knew a lot about them, but that's not what was coming out in the media. Stupid stuff was coming out in the media. So I would
Right.
cover those subjects in a way that I knew something a little bit different, or I knew a person involved, or I had a reference that wasn't listed in the media. So that was a lot of fun. Got huge exposure, all sorts of subjects. But I kind of got burned out around 2016 when fake news sites were just flooding the internet. I just couldn't keep up with all the potentially doubtful, air quotes
Right.
here, news. What does this mean when somebody says that this is happening to them and this anomaly occurred? You can't even follow it after a certain point. I was also heavily involved in the skeptical community. I worked with all three major U.S. skeptical organizations at the time.
Mhm.
I eventually exited the skeptical community for several reasons. And then I started a project called Spooky Geology, which very much was my wheelhouse, the intersection between geology, earth sciences, and all the weird paranormal topics and thinking about the earth. And there were endless topics. I'll never,
Right.
never cover everything. There was so much. And then I'm just always like looking around for things to do and going by my interest because this is just a hobby. It isn't what I do full time. And then I started a blog called Modern Cryptozoology that was originally a annotated biography of books. Then it turned into like news and commentary. And now it's just kind of my blog about what I see going on in
Mhm.
the crypto community. And I still write for my own site, SharonAhill.com. I occasionally write for 40 Times, like you said, a few journals here and there. Sometimes I collaborate with other people. So I've done a lot of very different things.
Yeah. And recently on Substack, because that made it easy for your new stuff to pop up for me when I followed you there. And I was like, oh, sweet. All the Sharon Hill.
Yeah, obviously, I don't do like Twitter anymore. And because the platforms are so spread out, it's very difficult to get that kind of following or to talk to the people that you'd like to talk to. So
Right.
the Fortean community in particular is quite spread out, and it's
Mhm.
hard to figure out what topic to follow if you're interested in all types of
Yeah.
anomalous topics. So it's very hard to find that community. Um, so
I
I
feel like there
post
was
in
a
different
goal.
places. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there was a golden moment where we were all on Twitter.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that was great.
Yeah, it was great. It really was. It was that you were able to make so many connections, good and bad. I had, fights with certain people, especially cryptid people,
Right.
who didn't like what I was saying, but that was actually, I think, constructive.
Yeah. Well, I hope they saw it that way. I'm sure some of them didn't, but
Yeah.
because I feel like there was a cryptid equivalent of what I referred to as UFO Twitter. You know, a lot of
Right.
UFO bros on there that
Yeah.
immediately called you the enemy for not being pro disclosure and pro whatever the propaganda talking point is at the moment. So
Yeah. I did save some choice screenshots from the day that I
mm,
still have from certain people.
okay, well, yeah, I'm not on Twitter anymore either, and
No,
I can't imagine. I don't know how people still are. Like I
I
have
don't
friends
either.
that are, and I don't get it, but
Yeah,
it's seems real toxic over there.
he does. Yeah.
Um, so would it be fair to say that your opinions or approach to some of these subjects has changed over the years and kind of evolved, or because it seems like you almost got like one foot in the skeptical waters and one foot in more the Fortean. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
And that I feel like it's been a pendulum for me.
yeah,
In your 20s or before that, you're just like, wow, this is amazing. There's aliens, there's Bigfoot, there's ghosts, and we can communicate with the dead and all this stuff. And you're very open to those types of belief. And then for me, as I learned the scientific method. I'm using air quotes again because that's not just one method. It's a whole big thing. And then finding the skeptical literature, and I was open to that, and I saw these questions resonated with me that they were asking. We need to be reasonable about this. The evidence should be better for this topic. If you really are interested in a topic, you need to see both sides. You need to address the skeptical questions because they're a weakness and you need to address that weakness. So I swung to the skeptical community for several years. However, that was actually partially toxic in its own ways.
Right.
They were very dismissive because I was very interested in cryptozoology and ghosts and stuff. They thought that was ridiculous. And I knew that this was, I don't know if they're real. I don't know if it's real, but people have had experiences, and it doesn't matter if you think that they were or were not ghost Bigfoot. Something happened to them, and it's important. And I felt that being dismissive of their experiences was not good and it wasn't fair. And then at that point, skepticism was also turning it was all atheism. And right. I found that very, that's not what I signed up for. So I left that and realized that I was swinging both sides, but now I was in the middle and I was my own voice. And I felt comfortable with that, uncomfortably comfortable or comfortably uncomfortable, however you want to put it, because it's not an easy place to be. You have to constantly hear everything from different sides. So yeah. That's the way I think it's supposed to happen. It's a true open mind. I'm listening to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, one quote that I always have in my head is, uncertainty is an uncomfortable position, but absolute certainty is an absurd one.
Right.
Yeah,
definitely.
So, I think that's great because I mean, you do come across as skeptical in some ways, but that always makes me think like, why is she still interested? But I always feel like you don't necessarily set out to debunk per se, but you are kind of calling bullshit where you need to.
Right. And I think that's fair because right. You can't just go on blindly believing things. It's just not a good way to go through life. But I have a lot of people ask me, why are you in this, Bigfoot forum or cryptozoology forum or something if you don't believe? Again, people have had experiences. It's a part of our culture. It's a very important part of our culture. Right now, I feel that people sometimes move into the paranormal topics or belief in these types of topics because they're leaving behind orthodox religion, traditional religious structure, but they're still looking for something bigger in the world. What's really out there? What are the bigger questions? Why are we here? And could there be more to life than what we see in front of us every day? To me, that's like an evolution of what used to be a religious type question or scenario. And people are now being able to pick and choose what they believe off of a shelf and do their own thing. So I do see some similarities there, but I don't really dig the whole religion thing. But I think it's pretty interesting to see how people are really into some of these paranormal topics and how much meaning it has in their lives.
Yeah, and I mean, to try to take meaning away from people just seems to me to be an unnecessarily cruel thing to do.
Right.
Like, I think the kind of skepticism you were talking about is typified by people like Richard Dawkins, who, is just condescending. I find him just to be very condescending and wrong half the time. He's not even right.
Yeah, I mean, I met Dawkins a couple times. He used to come to the skeptical conferences, and you only see that one side of a person. You don't see that they're actually a nicer person. Like you see James Randi was, can be very gruff with some people, but he was a really nice guy, and things like that. It's different to see that in different situations. However, a lot of these skeptics did not know a thing about the evidence that we were talking about. They
Mm,
were just, this is ridiculous and it doesn't fit, and I'm just going to dismiss it. And Shermer was really good at that. He just didn't know anything about it and just dismissed things. And it was very frustrating to me because a lot of that stuff was wrong. So, like you said, they really didn't know much about the topics where
right.
I felt like I knew more.
Yeah. I only use Dawkins as an example because I haven't seen him speak as much as I've read things that he wrote or that he's put out there that just were factually inaccurate to the point that it kind of undercut any argument that he could have that people believe in silly things. Because it's like you
Right.
didn't even get your facts straight, and then
Yeah.
you're telling us that we have silly beliefs. So that's kind of undercuts your argument there.
Yeah,
So
you have to watch.
yeah,
I mean, hubris is a thing as you get
yeah,
older, and yeah, you always have to
yeah,
keep learning.
yeah. So I mean, how would you define scientifical versus scientific, and especially in regards to, well, I guess you had it more in regards to paranormal investigation with ghosts, but I suppose you could apply it to cryptozoology as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So yeah. So as part of the investigation that or the research that I did on investigation groups, I looked at ghost hunters were huge at the time. This was like 2010 to 2017. Ghost hunters were huge. Um, Bigfoot hunters were getting up there. There was quite a few of them mostly. Some of them did all cryptids, but there wasn't really a call for people seeing, chupacabras or something like that. They were seeing
Mhm.
Bigfoot and ufologists. There was also what happened with ufology was this many small groups back in the day coalesced into MUFON.
Right.
So looking at a really big organization that had a lot of people but under one banner,
Hmm.
whereas the ghost hunters were 1,000 different small organizations and they didn't have any organization above them really. So that was quite different, but all of them had things in common. And what I did was I looked at their websites and how they portrayed themselves to the public.
Hmm.
And I looked to see how if they said they were doing science or if they were scientific in their methods. And
Hmm.
then I looked at what they actually did or how they portrayed themselves by using kind of a chart that I had made up and a way to code what they were doing. So scientifical was mostly what they did. So about 50% of them said, we're scientific. We have scientific
Hmm.
methods. What are those methods? Well, we use jargon and we have blinky gadgets and we are professionals and we act, professional and we name drop. And it
Yeah.
was
Right.
just, it was performance. It
Hmm.
was performing what they think science should look like to themselves and others, who are observing them, their clients, so to speak. They would go into a place and they would act as if they were scientists. They would pretend. It was like LARPing
Hmm.
a scientist. They didn't have any scientific training. I asked them when I asked certain ones, what do you mean by you're scientific? They would backpedal like crazy. Once somebody actually called them out on it, they had no answer.
Right.
They kind of admitted, well, we're just trying to be scientific. Well, you're faking it. You're being scientifical, but you're not being scientific. So that's kind of where
Hmm.
I got the name for it. And it really happens on TV a
Hmm.
lot.
Yeah.
What TV programs were doing was something that I called sham inquiry. You're supposed to be watching this TV show where there's investigators doing this inquiry or investigation into a site, but what they're doing, they already know what they want to find or what they want to present to you. So then they work backwards and take things in and they put them into the slots to make
Hmm.
a dramatic story, and then editing is done. And so it was a pre-existing framework. It wasn't real. It wasn't reality television. It was it's a deception for people sitting at home. And then what happened was a lot of people sitting at home were like, well, I could do that. And they got up and they did that. They became part of their local ghost hunting group, or eventually, like these days, now they're joining their local Bigfoot hunters.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I've always found that a little bit funny because I've never actually gone on a ghost hunt. I've experienced weird things in my life, and I've always felt like weirdness is going to find its way to me if it wants to. I don't have to go out looking for it. But if
Yeah.
I did, I think I would probably rely on like dowsing rods or a pendulum or something. I don't really have any use for like an EMF reader, like or a
Yeah,
EV.
EVPs and stuff. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. I would read these accounts of people getting EVPs, and I'm like, that doesn't really happen.
hmm
And then I would listen to EVPs. I'm like, that isn't what they said. That's just somebody like brushing the fabric on their coat or something. It
yeah,
sounds like a noise or a language. It was just really unimpressive. And I did go on a ghost hunt to a very supposedly haunted place. And of course, I've been to Gettysburg a number of times, and there's ghost hunters there almost all the time that you go. You can find people kind of
hmm
milling around doing those things. And I went to a couple conferences, and I listened to what they had to say, and I was just completely unimpressed.
right.
So, and now I am really done with ghost hunters. I just don't have any interest in ghosts whatsoever. So same with UFOs. I just had absolutely no interest in UFOs. If it's Earth lights, that's my thing. I love that idea that something is happening in the Earth that is pr- uh, producing some sort of unknown electrical phenomenon. That's really cool. That falls into the whole spooky geology thing.
hmm
But UFOs as craft, ETH, don't like. And then ghost hunters, I'm done. Yeah,
Yeah.
moving
But
on.
it seems like you do have a soft spot for cryptozoology because
I
you
do.
that's another whole section of your writings. And I had the idea to invite you on because around Christmas time you did like the 12 days of cryptids instead of 12 days of Christmas. And I was eating that up. So I went back and read it all again this weekend to prepare for the show. But yeah, I thought it was pretty great. Um, how would you define cryptid or cryptozoology? Because it seemed like in the course of these writings, you're talking about how this terminology has really changed over the years,
Right.
and how you can't really stop language from evolving. But um, how
Yeah.
would you define it now, where we are?
Yeah. This is contentious and it's
Right.
constantly changing. And uh, when I go on places like Reddit or something like that into those conversations, every single day you can see somebody arguing that's not a cryptid. It shouldn't be in this group.
hmm
We need to can't talk about that. But what's happening is it's very interesting what has happened with cryptozoology. Back in the day when it started in the 50s, Bernard Heuvelmans and Ivan Sanderson started this, and the intent was for it to be a scientific field.
hmm
This was the end of the colonialist era. Empires no more British Empire. The world was becoming more known.
Yeah.
And then we had this surge of like men's adventure tales, where white men still wanted to quest to dangerous places and conquest, but that era was kind of over. There still was like a certain aspect of racism present, like that these guys would go into these unknown areas of the Congo or Cameroon or places like that and say, "Oh, you natives, what animals have you seen? Because we want to come in and we want to take them and name them and give them our own description. And all your magical myths, that's not real. These are probably zoological animals, and we want to take them back and do science." And I don't know if it was a nice idea. It was a pie in the sky idea that there were still these types of very large animals that had not been discovered. Obviously, there's plenty of new species all the time, but these were definitely animals that had a cultural story to them. So, cryptozoology was traditionally considered the study of sightings and accounts of quote hidden animals.
Right.
So they had stories to them, but they never were found, described,
Mm.
classified, whatever. I never understood the word hidden. Who's hiding them? Are they hiding from us? What does that even mean?
Right.
And then, like, at what point is something a cryptid? Because dragons had stories about people seeing them.
Mhm.
People say they see dragons today. Are dragons cryptid? If cryptids, if you go on Reddit, no, absolutely, dragons aren't cryptid. They're fantastical animals. Well, why? We don't know what they are. We don't know what people saw. How can you say what it is that they saw? It's a cryptid because it's not scientifically recognized, but somebody
Right.
had a story about it. There was a couple things that I brought up again and again. There's a big argument about Mothman. Is Mothman a cryptid? No, because it's not a zoological, potentially zoological animal.
Mhm.
It's some sort of paranormal. So you get that argument about what's paranormal, what's fantastical, what's potentially zoological. You have this really large spectrum of cryptids. And if you think about it going from the left to the right, on the far left are animals that people say, oh, yeah, I saw this interesting monkey. The natives in an area will say, oh, yeah, there's this interesting monkey. Or there's a rat or a new
Mhm.
squirrel or something like that. And I just don't think that Bigfoot hunters are actually very interested in that. I
Right.
think, in there are definitely new species that are found. Oh, well, that's super interesting. They're rather mundane. You get to like the traditional cryptid ideas, the Bigfoot, the Nessie, Champ, Mokele, Mbembe, prehistoric survivors, all those kind of
Mhm.
things. Now you're straddling some potential weirdness there.
Mhm.
But then you go all the way to the right and you're dealing with really bizarre things that can't exist, like dogmen and Mothman itself. There isn't a
Mhm.
real man moth or bird man or whatever it was. It was originally described sort of as bird man. And then people will argue with me about no, cryptids are absolutely, these hidden animals that are scientifically unrecognized. Well, how do you know that until you find them? Because let's take the Loch Ness Monster, for example. There isn't just one cause for people saying they see a Loch Ness Monster. We know that they see logs, waves, other animals. We know that. At what point can we say that that's an animal that we describe as a plesiosaur like thing that's potentially existing there? We don't know that. That's a construction.
Mhm.
So we end up with cryptozoology and cryptids being just pretty much a mess. It was never a good construction to begin with, even though Hoovelmans would argue that he had a whole layout of what he wanted it to be. The word cryptid didn't come up until 1983, but it didn't catch on for much longer. And it was meant to replace monster. They were
Yeah.
using monsters, and that's not a great word, and it wasn't. But they never really operationally defined what a cryptid was. And I don't think the methodology for cryptozoology is there. And I think that the people who are pushing that it should go back to being a scientific subject, get rid of all this paranormal stuff, get rid of all these fantastical, fearsome creatures that are being described as cryptids. You cannot put the horse back in the barn. It's out.
Right.
It's cryptid is a popular term. You can't, like I said, like you mentioned, I said, you can't change you can't police the language. It changes all the time. And when I say that, people get really angry
Mhm.
because they kind of want it to be their thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because as you say, there's no real goal or definition or methodology with cryptozoology, so it is by definition a pseudoscience, right? If
It
you could
is,
even call it that. And
if you can
but
call it that. Yeah.
if people want it to be more respectable, they like to point to the coelacanth or say, oh, well, the mountain gorilla in Africa was once considered a mythical animal, and then we discovered they exist, and because they
That
wanted to be about discovery and actual science. And
right.
but when it's a new tree frog that had previously gone undescribed, you don't see a lot of news about it. I think that's cool. I want to know about all the new frogs, but
there are great blogs that just tell you every day new species that have been published. And there's a
Right.
lot of frogs, a lot of frogs, a lot of lizards, a lot of insects. Yeah, a lot of plants. It's great. There's new species being found every day. They're not cryptids. And I do get into the and but who's to say? Because there's no society anymore. There's no professionalism to that field. It failed. It failed in like the late 90s. It just kind of collapsed. And they didn't have success in finding the sexy cryptids, the things that would get big attention.
Mhm.
They went looking. They went looking for the Yeti first. They went looking for Bigfoot. They went looking for Nessie. They scanned the entire loch. Now we're into DNA sampling. They still haven't found anything. I think this is kind of a time of reckoning, and we could get into why, because there's been a couple things that have popped up in the recent year or two that I think really changes the scene for cryptozoology. But for me, what I started to see was a differentiation of there's zoo cryptids. Maybe a real animal is behind them, maybe not. I don't know. Then there's these paracryptids that have very strong paranormal characteristics to them.
Mhm.
And then there is the pop cryptid, which is what I came up with this model of pop goes the cryptid, because all of a sudden around 2014, the word cryptid overtook the word cryptozoology on Google.
Mhm.
And cryptozoology trended downward, and cryptids shot up like a rocket. Why? Because it was a word that caught on in pop culture at that time. And
Right.
now you see it everywhere. You see people, young people, using that word, meaning something. They say they use it in all sorts of different ways. It's very interesting. My cat is a cryptid because he rarely comes out and he may not even exist. My boyfriend
Mhm.
is a cryptid because he likes to hide out. He is not very social.
Yeah.
I'm a cryptid because I like to hang out in the woods and not be seen. Very different social connotations.
Mhm.
People use it as a sense of in the sense of an identity, the otherness. There's gay cryptids. It's very socially interesting. And
Mhm.
like I said, when I bring this stuff up in the community, they're like, no, 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 no. That's not what it is. Let's go back 20 years. You can't put that back in the bag.
Well, it became an industry, really. I
Mhm.
mean, especially with all the TV shows and like Finding Bigfoot, and you've written about all of these TV shows as well.
Yeah, I mean, think about it was 2012 when that mermaids documentary came
Oh
out, the
yes, I remember that.
documentary,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And then the year later it was Megalodon. And then there was like an explosion of these shows that you couldn't really tell what was fake and what was fiction or what was truth. It was very weird. But I think that had a lot to do with the direction that we turned in, and here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a confluence of things. Like, I never really thought I'd see Mothman have such a heyday. Like,
Right.
once upon a time, that was a really niche like subject.
The movie did it. It really did.
Yeah.
The movie injected new characteristics, new lore that wasn't there before,
Hmm.
and it caught on with some people who just really thought that was cool, and it's got to be one of the most popular cryptids right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
It's
I never
modified
thought
like
I'd see.
crazy. Yeah,
I mean, Bigfoot's huge too. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like you see Bigfoot everywhere now, and I can't tell you. I'm in Massachusetts, and there's so many people that have like a wood cutout of Bigfoot in their yard, or
Oh
like a
yeah,
chainsaw carving in a tree that looks like Bigfoot. And
absolutely. I see them too.
right, and I'm like, it's Massachusetts though. We don't have like a, you know, I'm not in the Pacific Northwest. I would expect it there, but Bigfoot has had a moment that has just kept going for quite a while, and
And I'm not so sure that people are having fun with it. They definitely are. I'm not really sure that the belief percentage when they do polls never gets higher than like 20% of the
Mm,
polls that people say they believe in Bigfoot. It's usually less.
mm.
It goes from like 10 to 20% at any poll. Are people saying they believe because it's fun? If you question people, do you really think that there is a 8 foot tall new ape-like animal out there? They would probably bet against it, but it's fun to believe, and it's fun to pretend and to buy into it and to use it to represent yourself as somebody who likes this kind of stuff and, likes to go out in the woods and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking about how like Bigfoot's like a spokesperson for jerky now, and I mean it is fun. It's like I've always been the kind of person that when I was a kid, I loved getting the Weekly World News and
Mm,
seeing what Bigfoot was up to. And
yeah,
now I feel like that's kind of that's reverberated out to the point where that's more mainstream now.
it
That used to
is.
be kind of a weird people would look at you funny for talking about Bigfoot back
And,
then.
and the same with Mothman. I was in my local garden center last year just checking out, and the lady behind the counter was talking to the other lady about going to the Mothman Festival.
Yeah,
That's crazy. I never would have heard that 5, 10 years ago. It just
right.
wasn't known, but now it's a thing.
Yeah. And there's so many festivals, and this is
Hmm.
something you write about frequently too. In fact, I heard recently this year they did an anniversary festival for the Kentucky meat shower. I don't know if you've heard about this.
I think I did. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's a great story.
Speaking of jerky, I think they had a
Yeah,
plane go overhead and drop like little jerkies on people.
yeah, that'd be
So,
great.
yeah, they did. That's what happened.
Wow. Fantastic. I found the town festival phenomenon just fascinating. And it really was the Mothman Festival that kicked that off. Although the Willow Creek Festival for Bigfoot is bigger, longer.
Mhm.
That was there before. But of course, there was also the Churubusco Festival celebrating a giant turtle. And so there were others that came before. But now you see smaller communities looking for their token cryptid, their monstrous patron, right, of their town, to to be the center of a festival, a family festival, family friendly, something
Mhm.
that brings people into the town, spends money, and I've been to several of them. Works pretty well. It's not that hard to do, and sometimes it catches on,
Mhm.
and now it's everywhere. So I kind of keep track of the festivals as best I can. Sometimes they come and go. They don't have them every year. They move locations, or there's a dispute, or like there's two Loveland Frogman festivals in Ohio right now.
Yeah,
It's not a very big deal, but there's two of them.
right.
And there's a ton of Bigfoot festivals, and it's just funny to see towns adopting their local creature, no matter how ridiculous it is. They
Right.
still love it.
Well, I'm guessing Albatwitch must be relatively close to you, the Albatwitch Festival, right?
Right. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
been I've been there a couple times as well. I
yeah.
spoke there the first one I spoke at. Um, that one is interesting. It started to get really big and it was great. And then I went last year and it was kind of a mess. I don't know
Huh.
what happened. If the weather is bad, that kind of ruins things. If they lose their spot and they have to move to another location, parking is always an issue. Places
Mhm.
like that for a small town, getting in vendors. So it can be a little bit of a hassle. But it's interesting to go there and see what is being sold, like in the stands, what the vendors are pushing, what the motifs are. Is it scary Bigfoot? Is it cute Bigfoot? Cute cryptids is a thing, family friendly stuff too, or is it horror based? There's every year it's a little different, the
Hmm.
themes. So I find that interesting as well. The art themes and the cosplay. Sometimes people are coming in costume, which is
Yeah,
which
that's
is
cool.
fun. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen a lot of pictures like that from the Mothman one. A
Hmm.
lot of people show up in costume for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely a thing.
Up here, all I get is the Exeter UFO Festival, which is fun
Hmm.
in its own way for the incident at Exeter, and that's
Right.
kind of the same thing. People dress in costumes. There's
Right.
inflatable aliens on every street corner. Um, the local bookseller that has used books, he must stock up his UFO books over the course of the year so that he can display them all in the front.
Hey, why not? People are interested in it. It's a way for them to make money. That's great. I think it's really fun. I wouldn't fault it. But it I don't really know that like the people who show up at those events, they're there to have fun. I don't know if they really believe the stuff or they're just there just to have fun. Whatever. It's all fine. Enjoy your local cryptid. What's wrong with that?
Well, right. I mean, and there's an entertainment aspect to it,
Mhm.
and just kind of a storytelling. That's really what it is storytelling.
Yeah.
Human beings have always loved a good story. I mean, as long as we've had language, from what I can tell, we've always been telling stories, right? So,
Yeah, and we
uh,
used to have like block parties and things like that. We don't have that anymore, usually in neighborhoods. So this is a way for a community to come together around a symbol that they're
mm,
all proud of. That's pretty cool. And on the same line, kind of like a tangent, is sports teams will adopt the local cryptid as their
mm,
mascot, and that's catching on. There's lots of sports teams that have cryptid mascots.
yeah.
So it's
Before we were recording, you were talking about the is it a baseball team that has Lake Champlain,
yeah,
the
yeah,
champ?
yeah.
Yeah,
There's the lake monsters up there in Vermont, in Burlington, Vermont. I do have a post on cryptid team mascots. They make great logos
yeah,
for your team. Just they're copyright free. You could make really cool things. Like I'm disappointed. I'm a hockey fan, and the one NHL team, the Utah expansion team, wanted to pick up as the Yeti, the Utah
mm,
Yeti. The cooler company filed an infringement on them and says they couldn't do that. So
uh,
we didn't get the Utah Yeti, we got the Utah Mammoth. But now we have the Seattle Kraken, and they could do a lot more with their logo. Let me just say, they can have a really good and they have not capitalized because I'd be the first one out there buying those Kraken logo merch.
right. You got to be careful with
Jersey
that. You
Devil,
know,
yeah, I love that too.
yeah. I think I have like one of the Lake Monsters like baseball caps somewhere around here in my collection. I found it at a thrift store. But it's good stuff. But I mean, as far as storytelling goes, I mean, a lot of this has overlap, and this is something that I always love looking at with fiction, because you see a lot of these cryptids pop up like in movies, or movies will influence what it is that people report seeing. So that,
Right.
I mean, that's a whole other layer to it that goes into it, right?
Yeah, I was really thinking about this the other day because I thought maybe this would be a good article about the movie characters, the movie depictions of cryptids. How much does that bleed into what people report? We know that happened with the Mothman because they started to say things about the Mothman that never actually happened, but were
Mhm.
just in the movie. Things like he appeared in Chernobyl, and he appeared
Yeah,
on the bridge, and things that didn't really happen in history. So there have been several cases of things that Blake Smith, my friend Blake Smith, calls scriptids, where
mm,
they were depicted in media, movies, or something, and then people ended up reporting them in real life,
yeah,
where they were heavily influenced by what was in that media first,
mhm,
and then reported in real life. That people saw the creature of the Black Lagoon and then reported a gill man and stuff like that. So
yeah,
there have been cases of that. And I kind of wondered how many things I could possibly pick up, how much of people saying, oh, this cryptid is cool. I see this in media, in art, or and this is happening with things like Wendigo and Dogman and things like that. People are making artistic depictions of these creatures, and then people are seeing them in real life. I mean, I think Slender Man is a good example of that, and
Right.
there's other creatures that are also that kind of a phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild to think of. And I mean, one example that comes to mind that you wrote about was the chupacabra is closely tied to the movie Species,
Yeah,
right?
people don't love that idea, but I think it's pretty solid. Um, the chupacabra changed. There's version one and version two. Version one was the spiky alien type thing that fit with the species
That's
depiction
my
of the
yeah,
alien.
that's my chupacabra for what it's
Right, that's
worth.
much more fun, yeah, than a mangy canid. And it is interesting if you actually look back that you can see the key parts of the mangy dog idea that was there in the beginning. The livestock was being attacked. Well, it was probably being attacked by dogs, and
Yeah,
maybe the dogs were didn't look so great or weren't very healthy. But that was an easy thing to import into the U.S. mainland, and then it came into Texas, and then it morphed into blue dogs and other things. There's actually, I mean, there's some interesting things behind that too. Anyway, because why are the dogs suffering mange, and some of them look kind of different than we would expect, and
hmm
it is kind of interesting. So there's definitely some curious things that can be discovered if you're studying cryptids, but the, you could see these things evolve because they're
yeah,
part of our culture, and culture evolves, and we pick things out of different places and they get added to the story. It's not a closed system, it's an open system. There's things going back and forth. They're going to change
right.
until we
And
find one, right?
yeah, I mean, and type one chupacabra, I feel like had other layers to it, where there was like a conspiracy theory layer, where there was this
Yeah.
idea that it escaped from a lab, or like a UFO layer, where people thought it might have been an alien or something, right? So,
Yeah, the people in
yeah,
Puerto Rico didn't really trust the American government. They thought they were
I
doing
mean,
experiments and
I mean that's fair. So,
true. Not that far-fetched.
but yeah, I mean, when you get the fictional stuff, I mean, Dogman always bugged me because I'm like, it's just a werewolf. Just say werewolf, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but they tried to scientize that too. The late Linda Godfrey, I remember she would try to say that, oh, maybe it's a type of dog that learned how to walk on its hind legs. No, no, it didn't. It ended up having quite a bit of Christian uh, theology in its background. The way people described it as a demon or being at graveyards and saying certain biblical references and things like that. So it's a pretty deep, uh, complicated creature. And
Right.
nobody really writes. I'm still waiting for a good Mothman biography. Nobody has written that because it's so complex. It's got so many layers. And you could say the same with the evolution of lots of cryptids. They just get quite complicated. They're not zoology, they're sociology.
Yeah, yeah, I think that with any of this and any of these anomalous subjects, it takes a multidisciplinary approach to really appreciate it. So I don't think you can come at it from any one particular angle, but if you had to pick one, I would say sociology or cultural anthropology is probably the best, because
Right.
what it means to people is as you said earlier, is kind of uh, needs to be considered apart from the literal materialistic reality of it, right?
Right. Because that exists. It
Right,
exists in the culture. And it's definitely important because people are talking about it.
right. And people having meaning or sense of identity is like I said before, it just feels cruel to dismiss that and take it away
Hmm.
from people. And
Right.
I feel like a lot of skeptics can just be downright mean about it and condescending. So
Yeah, it does take away a bit of the wonder of the world, and I think that's why people love it. It's a lot of fun. It's interesting to think that there's something cool out there, monsters in
yeah,
the woods. Yeah.
right. And I mean, also they become symbols for, as you know, at various points, how we come to terms with tragedy. I liked
Hmm.
that how you wrote about this because that's a really tricky subject. When people talk about
Yeah.
Mothman, you have a lot of people that don't want to talk about the Silver Bridge, and then you have a lot of others that like to sensationalize that as being like the end of the story or being directly related to Mothman. So I feel like there's various
Yeah.
camps on that, but it was a horrible tragedy. And as you
Yeah.
note, it gets a lot less attention than the few sightings of Mothman.
And that's controversial because when you're talking about town festivals,
Mhm.
this is kind of what brought it to my mind. I started looking at this list of town festivals, and I, I was struck by how some of them were connected to death and destruction and tragedy. And then I started counting them. And uh, another colleague of mine, Jeb Card, we started talking about the why this was. And the only person who'd actually done any work on this was Joe Laycock, a
Mhm.
religious studies scholar who did look at the Mothman. So I started asking around as best I could and asked people if you go back during the time of the Mothman flap, before Keel got there to Point Pleasant, what did people think about the Mothman sightings? Were they scared of it? Were they scared to go out of their house? Because, like, we think about it now, people were terrified to see the Mothman. They were running into him everywhere, and they knew something bad was going to happen. No, that's hindsight. What was really going on? People didn't really notice it. They didn't
Right,
really connect it to, and when the bridge did collapse, they did not connect it to the Mothman.
right. They
They
had
just
better
didn't make
things to
that
worry
connection.
about.
Exactly. They were like something bad happened. They did not connect it to people seeing a weird creature flying over them. So it was just in later work, particularly Keel, who made those connections. And now we think of it as, well, yeah, that's how it is. Another interesting example was the Public monster, the Goat
Mhm.
Man, which I feel is really controversial because that is an active issue of people still trying to you know live out that legend. They're doing legend tripping. They're going to that bridge and they're trying to see the Goat Man, and it's not a real thing, but people are really dying. And then they have a festival to celebrate the Goat Man.
Right,
And it is very controversial for the families that lost their loved ones on that bridge. And I don't feel good about it.
right,
But I've seen arguments both ways. Sometimes people will say it's the way that the community deals with this tragedy or this danger in their community is to personify it into this creature. I guess I can understand that too, but it's quite complicated, and I'm not really sure what to think about it. So, but and there are other examples about connecting cryptids to tragedies. The whole missing 411 thing with David Paulides. Again, he's not come right out and say, "Oh, it's Bigfoot." Some people will come out and say that Bigfoot took her. There's a
mhm.
series on Netflix right now, a short series. I started watching that, and it ends up not really being about Bigfoot,
Right.
but it
I
it
had that one
it.
spoiled for me already, but I
Oh,
do want to
okay.
watch it. It sounds interesting. Yeah.
It's okay. And there was in the past the good series about Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest that ended up being about pot farmers.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah, I
also very
watched that one.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had things like the guy who bombed Nashville, Tennessee, being a follower of, believing that there were reptilians or lizard people out there. So these things
Mhm.
kind of get woven into the stories where cryptids feel like they personify some larger belief in culture. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think more work needs to be done on that.
Yeah. And one of the ones you mentioned, I remember was only like a year or two ago where people were lost in a park somewhere, I think because they were looking for Bigfoot. But then you noted that it wasn't clear that that's what they were doing. Like they might have had a passing interest in Bigfoot, but the news really took that and
Yeah.
ran with it to the point
Yep.
where people were making fun of them and conflating it with conspiracy theory beliefs and stuff like that.
Yeah, could you
Um,
imagine you leave your house as a joke? Hey, I'm going out for a walk, going out for a hike, going to look for Bigfoot, and then something happens to you. They got lost. They perished from exposure,
right.
and not thinking about it. That's what the family says, and that gets out into the public. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
because it's perfect clickbait. People will
Yeah,
click on that. Yeah, yeah.
you do
That's
see that a lot in the media. I have seen a couple times where they've mentioned, oh, this person thought that this person they killed was a demon, or yeah, it's unsavory. It's upsetting.
well, it's pretty ghoulish to do that for the clicks, but
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, with all of that, it occurred to me that something I've noted before. I'm certainly not the first one, but the term monster almost is more appropriate because it's derived from the term uh, I think the Latin monstrum,
Hmm.
which had associations with omens and portents and stuff like that. So monsters are supposed to be ominous or harbingers of something that's coming.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
so I almost feel like
There's
monster is a more appropriate word. You know?
indeed. I mean, it's just the way humans operate. We tend to personify
Yeah,
those tragedies. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and we do in language still. I mean, I guess some of the phrases are outdated, but we talk about like the green dragon of envy or something like that. You
Right.
know?
Yeah, I didn't think of that one. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
um, yeah. Well, I think that's. I think it's really good to point all that out, and I thank you for doing so. Because the other thing you do well is you kind of call people out for borrowing stuff from indigenous legends or traditions, cultural traditions that become divorced from their original oral tradition of storytelling and turned into creepypasta, basically online.
Yeah, I'm not the one to say what's cultural appropriation or not, but it just seems to feel like certain stories get ripped from another culture and made into a commodified thing on your podcast or your YouTube channel or whatever you have. And you have these people that aren't in that culture saying what that culture is saying about that creature. And to me, the Bigfoot of Native American lore just doesn't sound like the Bigfoot that people are seeing in their backyard. It does not seem to
Right.
be the same thing.
Not
But
to
what,
mention, there's dozens and dozens of tribal
yeah,
things that people equate with Bigfoot, and those are all separate things that are very
they're all
different from
different.
each other.
Yeah. And I really feel like a cryptozoology researcher trying to get some validity is going to reach back into the past and cherry pick
Mhm.
things that look like they could bolster that claim to make it out to be a long tradition.
Yeah,
And I think that that is fraught with errors.
yeah. I don't know if that counts as scientifical, but it's certainly
Right.
faulty thinking.
Yeah, the Wendigo thing is a long running thing that's extremely disturbing. How that's been commodified into culture, and it seems really, really wrong
Yeah, I agree.
compared to the true stories.
I mean, if it's got antlers, that's
Yeah,
not the thing,
exactly. Yeah,
right?
right.
Somebody came up with a design they thought was cool. I mean, it probably was originally um, like a creepy pasta thing, like one of those. They used to have those contests. That's where Slender Man came from. Was
Right.
kind of an online contest for who could come up with the best creepy image.
Yeah, and it's hard to trace like where would that original image came from? Somebody added a creepy deer man,
Right?
and it ended up being equated with the Wendigo legend.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, but speaking of images and all this stuff, I mean, like this stuff I don't think there is a way nowadays, and this has been true for some time, but especially now that we could ever have video or photographic evidence that's worth anything at all in regards to cryptids or as proof. I don't think it proves
Right.
anything now, right?
No, I mean, it's been a while since we've been able to do Photoshop and things like that, and manipulation. So it's been a while since uh, I would ever think that any video or photo evidence was any good.
Yeah,
And now with AI, it's impossible. We
right.
just cannot. In fact, you're safe to dismiss any audio or visual or photo evidence, I'm sorry, video or photographic evidence
Hmm.
just out of hand
Right.
because unless you have corroborating evidence for it that appeared or other witnesses
Hmm.
or you were witnessing or you have something that supports the claim of what you have on this
Yeah,
digital piece of footage, it's worthless.
yeah,
You
I get.
just can't do anything with it.
Right. People send me stuff all the time. They're like, what do
Mm,
you think of this? Or, oh, check
mm,
this out. And I go, well, I have no way to tell you if that's real or not, but I'm going to lean toward just not because it's just too easy to fake this stuff.
right, yeah.
You're going to have to do better. I'm going to need context at the very least. Like, I have to know who took it and what their story is. It's just, um, but and I mean, I'm fine with a hoax. I actually think hoaxes are very amusing a lot of the time. But but AI just seems like the most low effort hoax. It's just there's not even
Yeah,
an art to it.
but people love to just put it out there. And there was always this uh, excuse. Why would somebody hoax this thing? Why would they go through? People have hoaxed for a lot less. And
Right.
some people are just jokers, and that's what they do. And they want to get a rise out of people. And I think that we're just deluged with jokers on the internet
Yeah.
sending stuff to paranormal podcasters and YouTubers and bloggers and saying, this is an account I had, and watching it go up on their media and doing this. I think we're being flooded by it. It's
Right.
still getting clicks though. I mean, people are still reading this stuff, and some people are believing it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
So
don't know.
as long as people keep clicking, I mean, it'll
Yeah,
keep coming. I think.
yeah.
So I guess this is kind of like a turning point, as you mentioned earlier for cryptozoology. We're kind of do you think it's the end of an era, or do you think it's going to evolve into something else, or do you think we're going to start to see a decline in interest?
I'm very bad at predicting these things.
I know I'm putting you in an awkward position of
Well,
predicting, but
like say it like 2017 when I was finishing up my book, it's like, oh, ufology is dead. How wrong I was.
yeah.
Ghosts kind of declined. I mean, they hit a
Mhm.
peak and they kind of declined. The ghost hunters not as popular anymore. Um, we saw the end of like Finding Bigfoot. It ran very long time, 9 seasons or something like that. They never found Bigfoot.
Mhm.
And then the shows that kind of came after weren't as influential. And now, there's a couple things that have happened, particularly in Bigfootery, but also in cryptozoology in general. And like you said, the AI thing is really bad because people can't really take seriously any video or photographic evidence anymore. So it's kind of out of the picture now. But I recently wrote a post because I started thinking about this. Can the Bigfoot community recover from the Patterson Gimlin film reveal that's
Mhm.
just out this past month? Can they recover from Jeff Meldrum's death? Will
Mhm.
somebody be able to step in as the scientific face of Sasquatch research?
Mhm.
Can they come back from the fact that there's no evidence any better for 60 years and some that key piece of evidence, that cornerstone, like it or not, was the PG film, and now that seems to be about to fall for
Right.
good.
Yeah.
So I don't. I think it's inevitable that it changes. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Huh.
To me, I think it's going the pop cryptid route where cryptids are just as popular as ever, but it's not about finding them. It's
Right.
about just having fun and the explosion of media and art and consumerism.
Yeah. Well, maybe the real Bigfoot was the friends we made along the way, you
That's
know. I have to say, it has been kind of amusing to watch all the Bigfoot people um, talk about the Patterson Gimlin film nonstop lately, because I have noticed a good amount of them that have come out and they're like, I always knew it was fake. And you're
Oh,
just like,
really?
did you? Did you really? Because I'm pretty sure you weren't saying that before.
It is really a strange example of cognitive dissonance too.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a lot of
uh,
people that like to want to be right all the time, you know?
right. I haven't seen the people who said I haven't seen too many people that have said I knew it all along, except for the skeptic people that I'm
Yeah.
already, friends with. I have seen a lot of people just lose their heads about it.
Right. I've
They
seen that
are
too. Yeah.
twisting themselves in knots. I cannot believe the mental acrobatics they're doing to maintain this belief. And I have seen in the past, people who science has failed to discover Bigfoot, so they in order to sustain that belief, they turn to more paranormal ideas about Bigfoot. It's
Hmm.
an ultra terrestrial, interdimensional, something like that. In order to maintain that belief, they have to resort to more extreme assumptions.
Right.
I see what these so-called scientific Bigfooters who will believe anybody off the street who said I had a Bigfoot encounter, just
Hmm.
right off, just without question, they'll believe them. Oh, this is a credible witness, blah 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 blah, and take their information and put a dot on the map and record it in a database and all that. And now you give them actual evidence that's supported, and they reject it out of hand. They are
Right.
just so adamant about not not allowing this to be deconstructed.
Hmm.
So if anybody doesn't know, this is about the Capturing Bigfoot documentary that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and is not out in public distribution yet. So not that many people have seen it, but the people who have seen it has said this is a slam dunk. This really closes the case on showing that the Patterson Gimlin film was a hoax by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. So it just clashes with a lot of their belief and their ideas about Bigfoot. And it doesn't mean that everything collapses, but I feel like it is creating a lot of doubt in the community for people who are critical thinkers. And for those on the outside who now say, oh, for sure, now we know this is a hoax. Let me not bother with Bigfoot at all. And
Right.
so we may see a decline in people now going out into the woods, paying to go out into the Bigfoot camping adventure or whatever.
Mm.
So I don't see people loving Bigfoot any less. They love the idea of it, but I don't think they're gonna see it as a real creature
Mm.
as they did before.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems reasonable. I mean, for my part, I am interested in seeing the film, but
Hmm.
it's like I don't feel like I can have an opinion until I do, right? Like, it's
Right.
just I haven't really said much about it publicly. I haven't posted about it too much because I don't know. I'm talking about what people tell me is in the film. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
apparently you had
fair. Yeah.
mentioned Dr. Meldrum, and from what I understand, he's in the film, and he
Hmm.
he he takes back anything he said in favor of the PG film being accurate. But again,
Yeah.
this is all I'm just hearing from people that allegedly saw the film. Second,
Yeah, I'm not
yeah,
I'm not too sure about that one. I would be interested in seeing his actual reaction. Unfortunately, he's not here to speak about it,
right,
after the fact, which is sad. What I found interesting is it's definitely fair to say, let's withhold judgment until we see the film. However, you have a lot of people coming out and saying, no, it's a hoax of a hoax, or it's AI and all
Hmm.
this stuff. That's absurd, because if that was true, we would have seen a cease and desist. We would have seen,
Right.
other people coming out and saying this is fake, this is not true. People are saying it's AI. Well, it's not. It's not.
Right.
Nobody would go out that far on a limb with the Pattersons, who are litigious. They've had a copyright on this thing. They're not going to let it go unless it's time to let it go.
Right.
And I think it is time to let it go, and they knew that. So I'm pretty much convinced it's the and I'm if that's the case, which I'm pretty sure that's the case, I'm very happy about that, because it removes that ambiguity.
Hmm.
And now we can say, that said, there's still a bunch of people who are like, no, that's not,
Right.
it's not. I'm going to twist myself in knots and say that that's not true. So very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting times, strange
Yeah,
times. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
But but yeah, this has all been great. This is a blast to discuss cryptids with you. And I'm glad we finally got the opportunity to talk after
Yeah,
having read your work for so long. It's been a real pleasure. So
yeah. I love to talk about it. It's my favorite subject. Sometimes in the past, I've gone on paranormal podcasts, and it ends up curving back to UFOs, and I'm like, please don't go back to UFOs. I don't
well,
want
I
to talk
only
about
did that a little
UFOs.
bit. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. But I have been cornered by some people who are just, well, let's talk about UFOs. Please, let's not talk about UFOs. Let's talk about Earth lights, or just, something
Yeah.
more interesting that may have I love natural anomalous phenomenon. And that, so if it, there's strange rains or weird sounds, or uh, cryptids even fall into that, strange animals. That's my jam. Those are
Yeah.
the things I really like.
Well, for strange sounds, you wrote about one that's kind of near me, the Moodus noises in Connecticut.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That I got so lucky with that one. I didn't hear the Moodus noises, but um, I did have enough background in earthquakes to understand what was going on there, and I was able to meet up with a folklorist who knew a lot about it and took me on a tour of the park and showed me all the interesting places. We went into the cave and did all the things, and it was so illuminating to see what was going on, and I loved that town. I went back there again, took my husband there because I had such a good time. I just loved the feeling of the town, and it was just beautiful, and enjoyed it a
Yeah.
lot.
Connecticut's got a lot of really cool places in it. It's
Yeah,
a lot of strange little corners in Connecticut.
yeah. We went to the Devil's Hop Yard, and we
Yeah.
hiked that, and oh, it was, yeah, so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Um okay, well what do you have what do you have on the plate for the future? What are you considering writing about next? Because it seems that you're writing all the time. So
Yeah, I have a piece on pop cryptids that's coming out in a book that not my book, but a collaboration. So that article is coming out in a book form. Um, that probably will be a few more months before it actually gets published. I just heard from the editor, who said that he's got the final proof, so it's in place. So I really want to get that out for people to read, because I feel that that's an interesting take that nobody's really talking about. Pop cryptids, as
yeah,
cryptids are just everywhere now. It's common vernacular to use the word like never before. So I think that's super interesting.
right.
What else? I do have some ideas. Like I would like to collaborate on an article about what is cryptozoology, what are cryptids, what problems are we having with that definition.
Hmm.
I did talk to somebody about collaborating on that. I would like to get more articles out into journals, because Blogs aren't getting the attention that they used to. I'm not going to do YouTube very much. I
Right.
just have a couple things out there. It's not my thing. And I think that's kind of ephemeral. I think that the putting things into legitimate resources that people can have is the way to go, and to get them out to the public that they could access them too. So it's not behind a paywall or something
Right.
is important.
Yeah,
To have some peer
absolutely.
review. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I think is lacking in cryptozoology. Not that many people are actually writing scholarly academic things about it. And I would like to be a part of that. I would like to do that. So that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to do that. It's easy sometimes to just pop out a blog. Sometimes it takes me a week or so to come up with a blog because I don't want to put out mistakes. I don't want to put out stuff that's not referenced or
Mhm.
sourced. So it takes a long time. Some of these YouTube videos, you can tell they're not really well sourced, or they're full of mistakes and stuff like that. But those are the
Yeah.
things that get attention, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's true. And I've I feel like I have to say this anytime I'm talking about my podcast out in the real world with people if they ask me about it, and I'm like, yeah, there's things I probably could do to really make my podcast a lot more popular, but they're not things I'm willing to do.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to do any like 30-second real videos with me, where where it's me wide-eyed for the freeze frame. So
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
I don't want to do that. Uh, so the people that will, the people that will benefit, hopefully will find it. That's
Yeah.
just kind of my
Yeah.
philosophy with it. But
That's great.
where can people follow you to keep up with it? We mentioned your Substack, and
Yeah, so what I use the Substack to sort of reference the other places. Sometimes I
right,
do just stuff on the Substack that's a little unique. But mostly SharonAHill.com. There was another person named Sharon Hill, so I got the Sharon A Hill to differentiate. That's been my blog for 20 years that I've
yeah,
been writing. Some of the stuff I took down because it's outdated, but it's got a whole pile of different stuff on there. It's got spooky geology. You could just click on that if you're interested in spooky geology topics. And it's got Pop Goes the Cryptids if you're just interested in that part. Different categories, lots of different categories, anomalies and Fortean stuff. I occasionally still write for Fortean Times here and there when the mood strikes me. And then I do modern cryptozoology blog if that's all you're interested in, the cryptozoology stuff on WordPress. And what else? That's about it.
yeah.
That's
Well,
enough.
there's plenty there to keep people busy. 20 years worth of blog posts. So
Yeah.
go check it out, people. But
Thanks.
uh, th- thanks again for coming on, Sharon. This has really been a blast.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.